I used to believe in building a life as a team. You know, the kind of relationship where you share everything, from morning coffee routines to career milestones. I made 2 cups every morning, even on days when he rushed out without a sip. I was always his biggest cheerleader, celebrating his wins louder than my own. Even when work drained me, I made space for him. For us. That's what love was supposed to look like, right? Effort, commitment, showing up. But lately, something wasn't right. His smile didn't quite reach his eyes anymore. He came home late, always with the same excuse. Meetings with the boss, crazy deadlines, industry pressure. I wanted to believe him. God, I tried. I told myself not to be that kind of wife, the paranoid one. But the signs kept piling up. His phone was always face down. I'd catch the faintest whiff of perfume that wasn't mine. And once, while doing laundry, I found a hotel keycard he swore was from a conference months ago. Still, I kept quiet. Then came the night I couldn't sleep. He was snoring beside me, blissfully unaware. I reached for his tablet, innocently at first. Maybe I'd check my emails, maybe scroll through some articles. But a notification lit up the screen, and with one swipe, my entire world tilted. There they were, the messages, explicit, bold, the kind that didn't leave room for doubt. Hotel bookings, late-night plans, inside jokes I had no part in. My heart pounded so loud I could hear it in my ears. And then, her name. His boss. The woman he always spoke of like she hung the moon. I'd met her once, at a gala. She smiled at me like we were allies. What a joke. Turns out, they weren't just working late. They were plotting their own little empire. They thought they were climbing together, chasing success hand in hand. But here's the thing about climbing too fast, without watching your footing. Sometimes, you trigger the avalanche without realizing it. I sat there in the dark, tablet glowing in my lap, trying to remember how to breathe. You think you'll scream when you find something like that, maybe throw things, break down. But I didn't. I just sat, completely still, like if I didn't move, maybe the truth would crawl back into hiding. I read every message, every emoji, every "can't wait to see you." And all I could think was, he used to say those things to me, before her, before all this. It's funny, isn't it? How betrayal doesn't arrive with a bang. It creeps in, one missed call at a time, one changed password, one smile that feels just a little too rehearsed. And then, one day it's all laid out in front of you, and you realize that the person you trusted most didn't just lie to you. They rewrote the story of your life without you in it. I wanted to wake him, to shake him and ask why. But the answer was already there. Clear as day. She wasn't just his boss, she was his escape. His shortcut, his shiny new future. And me? I was the past, the dependable one. The woman who held things down while he chased ambition like it was a virtue. But here's what he never understood. I have ambition too. Mine just wears different clothes. Mine doesn't destroy what it loves to get ahead. That night, something shifted in me. Not rage, not sadness. Something colder, quieter, a new kind of clarity. I wasn't going to fall apart. No, I'd already done enough giving. The truth is, they looked so confident in those messages, so sure of themselves, as if nothing could touch them, as if I'd disappear quietly, too stunned to move. But they forgot who I am. I'm not some background character in their power trip. I built too much, sacrificed too much to be erased like that. Let them climb. Let them celebrate. They don't know it yet, but the ground beneath them is already shifting. And I'm not the same woman who used to make 2 cups of coffee. By morning, I'd memorized every word they exchanged, the fake names they used at hotels, the way he told her I wouldn't understand. It was surreal, seeing your life picked apart like some tired subplot in their drama. But what gutted me most wasn't the betrayal. It was how small he made me sound, like I was this obligation, this safe bet he'd outgrown. He didn't just cheat on me. He downgraded me in his mind to justify it. That cut deeper than any affair ever could. I didn't confront him right away, not because I was scared, but because I needed time to think, to breathe without the taste of humiliation in my mouth. I smiled through breakfast, kissed him on the cheek, asked about his long week. I watched him lie with ease, and I realized he wasn't just cheating on me, he was proud of it, thriving on it, like her power somehow transferred to him, and now he thought he was untouchable. Spoiler, he wasn't. There's a strange kind of calm that comes after devastation. Like, once the worst thing happens, you're free. And that's how I felt. Free. Done mourning the version of him I fell in love with. Done trying to hold a marriage together by myself. He could keep his power games, his hotel rendezvous, his high heels in the boardroom. I had something better now, clarity, direction, and an anger that didn't scream. It planned. Because while they were busy congratulating each other in backlit hotel rooms, I was already rewriting the story. Not as the heartbroken wife, but as the woman they never saw coming. They thought they were climbing together. They didn't see the avalanche coming. The day I confronted him, I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just looked him in the eye and said, "I know." At first he froze. Then came the excuses. "It just happened. I didn't mean to hurt you." And finally, the line that still echoes in my mind, "You don't understand what it's like being around someone with that kind of power." As if that explained it. As if her title erased the vows he made to me. He wanted me to pity him, to accept that he was swept away by something bigger. But all I saw was a man too small to resist it. I filed for divorce that same week. No drama, no second thoughts. Just a clean break and a very clear message. I won't beg someone to stay who's already halfway out the door. My friends worried I was bottling everything up, but they didn't see what I saw. This wasn't a breakdown. This was a blueprint. I wasn't going to sit in the ruins of our marriage and cry. I was going to build something from them. Something better. Something mine. So I started with what I knew best. Work. I updated my resume, rewrote my pitch, and started making calls. I applied for positions that once scared me. Took meetings I would have once thought I wasn't ready for. I stopped second-guessing myself in rooms full of men with louder voices and thinner resumes. It was strange how quickly the fear faded, like I'd been walking around in shoes 2 sizes too small and finally kicked them off. I wasn't rebuilding myself. I was finally allowing myself to take up space. Late nights at the office became my therapy. I poured myself into strategy decks and client calls. I launched a consultancy on the side, advising women-led startups on how to break into male-dominated sectors. My name started circulating. Invitations to panels, roundtables, interviews. People started seeing me, really seeing me. And for the first time in a long time, I was building something that no one could take credit for but me. There were moments, I'll admit, when the silence stung. Coming home to an empty apartment, cooking for one, waking up without the sound of his keys jangling in the bowl by the door. Grief is strange like that. It shows up in the mundane. In the way the light hits the kitchen at 7:30 a.m. In the echo of your own laughter when there's no one to hear it. But even in that emptiness, I could feel something shifting inside me. I wasn't shrinking anymore. I was stretching, growing, healing. I started paying attention to things I'd once ignored. My gut instincts, the energy in a room, the way people treated me when I wasn't wearing a wedding ring. And I'll tell you something. Power has a scent. Not the kind you spray on, but the kind that follows you when you walk into a room already knowing who you are. I stopped apologizing for being direct. I stopped diluting myself to make others comfortable. The version of me who kept quiet to keep the peace, she doesn't live here anymore. Networking became my secret weapon. I didn't just want a seat at the table. I wanted to build the damn table myself. I listened more than I spoke, asked better questions, and learned how the game was really played. I watched how deals were made in back rooms and loyalty traded over cocktails. And through it all, I didn't just learn the rules. I rewrote them. The same people who once overlooked me were now quoting me in meetings, inviting me to lead, trusting me with decisions that shaped futures. Funny how people start treating you differently when you stop needing their approval. I didn't chase titles, I chased impact. I didn't beg for opportunities, I created them. My ex and his boss may have thought they were the power duo of the industry, but they were too busy looking down to see what was rising up behind them. I wasn't rebuilding just to survive. I was rebuilding to lead. Somewhere along the way, I stopped thinking about them. The two of them. What they were doing, where they were working, if they were still together. That part of my life became a closed door, not slammed, just gently, but firmly shut. My story no longer revolved around betrayal. It revolved around reinvention. I wasn't healing because of what they did. I was healing in spite of it, and that made all the difference. What surprised me most was how many women started reaching out. Old colleagues, acquaintances, even strangers online. They wanted advice, mentorship, courage, and I gave it to them, not as someone who had all the answers, but as someone who'd walked through the fire barefoot and lived to tell the story. I realized that the more I shared, the less shame I carried. My divorce wasn't a failure. It was a fracture that let the light in. One night, I was invited to speak on a panel about female leadership in high-stakes industries. The irony didn't escape me. Years ago, I sat in the shadows of women like her, the kind who wielded power like a weapon. Now, I was the one behind the mic. I told my story, carefully, not to expose anyone, but to illuminate the path forward. The applause that followed wasn't loud, but it was steady, real, earned. I walked off that stage knowing one thing for sure: I had arrived. They broke my spirit, yes, but they underestimated what a woman can do with broken pieces. I didn't just put myself back together. I built something bigger, stronger, unshakable. And while they were still climbing, still playing the same old game, I had already entered a whole new arena, one where I didn't just participate. I led. It started with a phone call I almost didn't answer. I was in the middle of prepping a proposal for a global expansion, coffee cold, inbox overflowing, when the call came through. "We're considering you for a leadership role in a merger." I blinked at the name of one of the companies. It sounded familiar. Too familiar. I scrolled through the executive list, and there it was. Her name. Still perched on a pedestal she probably thought couldn't be touched. I won't lie. My first instinct was to say no. Why walk into a room full of ghosts? But then something steadier rose up in me. Curiosity, maybe, or closure, or power. I accepted the offer with a calm voice and a sharp smile. I wasn't the same woman they remembered. And this wasn't about revenge. Not yet. This was about position, about seeing the board from above, not just playing on it. I stepped into that negotiation with one goal in mind: take my time, watch the players, and choose the right moment to move. At the start, I kept a low profile. I listened more than I spoke, observed who answered questions and who avoided them, who postured, who pretended. I made mental notes, not just about business, but about loyalty, character, ego. And her? She hadn't changed, still sharp, still polished. Still completely unaware that I was no longer orbiting her power, I was on a direct path to eclipse it. We made polite eye contact across the table. She didn't recognize the threat. That was her first mistake. The merger moved fast. I stayed strategic, quiet strength, deliberate moves, and when the time came to nominate a CEO to oversee both branches, the board voted, unanimously, for me. I didn't gloat. I didn't flinch. I simply accepted the position and scheduled my first round of internal evaluations. I now held the keys to everything they had once tried to shut me out of. She used to control my husband. Now I controlled her calendar. The day I stepped into the CEO's office, It didn't feel like a victory parade. It felt earned, like slipping into a role that had always been mine, just waiting for me to grow into it. I stood by the window, looking down at the city that had once swallowed me whole. Now, it pulsed beneath me like a quiet heartbeat. I didn't need to announce my arrival. The room spoke for itself, my name on the door, my team outside, my decisions shaping the future. I scheduled my first one-on-one with her that same week. Formal tone, calendar invite, no emotion. When she walked in, she smiled politely, tight-lipped, guarded. I watched her scan the room like she wasn't sure whether to sit or stand. I offered her a chair and thanked her for coming, just like I would with anyone else. That was the key. No drama, no pointed words. Just business, cold, controlled, undeniable business. She didn't know how to play in that kind of silence. She kept waiting for the knife that never came. What I gave her instead was structure, reassignments, new expectations, a shift in authority that left no room for ambiguity. She was no longer steering. She was reporting. And I didn't need to say a single word about our history to make the message clear. This is my company now. She nodded through the meeting, agreed to everything with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, and I watched her fold herself into the new hierarchy like a woman trying not to shatter. Outside the glass walls, the team worked on, oblivious to the quiet unraveling happening behind my closed door. But I felt it, the weight of all those past conversations. The echoes of betrayal that no longer stung. I wasn't here to humiliate her. That would have been too easy. I was here to do the one thing she never expected me to do: thrive. Not in spite of her, but above her, without ever raising my voice. The weeks that followed were surprisingly smooth. She adjusted, at least on the surface, showed up on time, responded to directives, smiled in meetings. But I knew the difference between compliance and control. She wasn't in charge anymore, and it showed in the way she triple-checked every email before sending it, in how she no longer made decisions without approval. Watching her shrink inside her own reputation was poetic. But I didn't gloat. That was never the point. It's strange how quiet power feels. There were no dramatic confrontations, no slammed doors, just subtle shifts. Her name slowly faded from key projects. Her access narrowed. Invitations dried up. And all of it happened through protocol, through systems she once used to elevate herself. I didn't need to punish her. The structure did that for me. That's the thing about corporate ladders. The same hands that pull you up can just as easily stop reaching. Sometimes I'd catch glimpses of her in the hallway, still polished, still proud, but with a different energy now. She avoided my gaze or smiled too quickly when I passed. And every time that happened, I was reminded of just how far I'd come. Not just in title, but in strength. I wasn't looking for a fight anymore. I was looking forward, and that forward motion was, in itself, the sharpest edge I had. No one needed to know the history between us. Not the team, not the board, not even HR. I buried the past in professional language and scheduled performance reviews. And that's what made it powerful. Revenge didn't have to roar. Sometimes it walked in heels, carried a leather binder, and spoke in measured tones behind a glass wall with her name etched in gold. The leadership meeting was already on the calendar, a quarterly check-in, nothing unusual. But this one was different. For me, for her, for the story we hadn't told, but both remembered in every glance. I walked into the boardroom early, like always, arranged the chairs, reviewed the agenda. When she arrived, she hesitated at the door. It was subtle, barely a pause, but I saw it. She wasn't sure how to greet me. Not anymore. She sat near the end of the table, 2 seats down from her usual spot. A small gesture, but telling. Once, she commanded rooms like this with ease. Now, she was measuring her words. We ran through the updates, performance metrics, client retention, upcoming initiatives. I kept my voice steady, my questions neutral. No mention of the past, no acknowledgement of what we both knew. Just numbers, goals, timelines. That's the thing about professionalism. It can be the sharpest blade in the drawer. When it was her turn to present, she stumbled slightly over her opening line. Nothing major. But her confidence wasn't bulletproof anymore. I listened, nodding, giving nothing away. And when the meeting ended, I thanked everyone for their time, looked straight at her, and said, "Let's schedule a follow-up. I want to go over some role adjustments." Her eyes flickered. There it was, that moment of recognition. This wasn't just business. This was the beginning of the reckoning. After the room cleared, I stayed behind, gathering my things slowly, deliberately. I could still feel the tension she left behind, like static in the air. She had spent so long holding the strings, certain she'd never be the one dangling. But I wasn't going to cut her down all at once. No, this was going to be measured, controlled, and unmistakably mine. The follow-up meeting was set for the following Monday. No one questioned it. These kinds of realignments were routine. But she knew, and I knew she knew. When she stepped into my office, she tried to play it calm. Tailored blazer, polite smile, even a soft, "Thanks for meeting with me." I motioned to the chair across from me. No small talk, no fake warmth, just the agenda open in front of me and a pen in my hand. The air between us was crisp, professional, chilling even. I started with the formalities, given the merger and the shifting structure, and outlined the new divisions. I explained how we were refining leadership bandwidth and optimizing oversight. Then I slid the new project list across the desk. Lower-tier clients, fewer direct reports. She scanned the document, blinked, then lifted her eyes to meet mine. I held her gaze, unflinching. I could see her trying to calculate what to say, but there was no room left for maneuvering. It was already done. She nodded slowly, lips pursed like she wanted to argue but knew better. "If this is where I can be most useful, then of course," she said. Her voice was even, but I heard the shift underneath, that edge of humiliation disguised as grace. I didn't smirk. I didn't soften. I simply replied, "We're counting on your experience to keep those accounts steady." That was the game now. Measured language, cool delivery, and decisions that cut cleaner than any insult ever could. When she left the room, she walked slower than usual, shoulders just a little lower. I watched her through the glass wall, her reflection fading as she turned the corner. It didn't feel like a victory. It felt like gravity had shifted. For so long, she moved as if the world tilted in her favor. But now she was learning what it felt like to operate without power propping her up. And I had no intention of handing it back. Word travels fast in an office, even when no one's speaking out loud. Within days, people started to notice the shift. Her emails came less frequently. Her name showed up on fewer initiatives. Some whispered, most just watched. That's the thing about power. It doesn't scream. It lingers in presence, in pace, in who gets called into which room and who's left out. And now? Everyone could feel the balance tipping. Quietly, undeniably, in my direction. But I didn't flex. I didn't pull her into a corner and list all the reasons she deserved this. I didn't recount the nights I spent wondering where he was, or the pain of reading their messages. That was the old me, the one who wanted explanations. This version of me had no appetite for closure, only clarity. And clarity told me that taking her down with noise would be giving her more attention than she was worth. Instead, I let her fade, little by little, layer by layer. I focused on the work, mentoring junior executives, restructuring departments, strengthening our foothold in markets she never even bothered to explore. And in doing so, I wasn't just managing her fall, I was reinforcing my rise. I didn't need applause. I didn't need anyone to know the full story. The only thing that mattered was the message behind every reallocation, every removed privilege, every silence that followed her name in a room that once echoed with it. She thought revenge would come loud and blazing. She expected fire. But that's not how it came. It came in the form of a polite meeting invite, a revised org chart, a seat at the end of the table, and a woman she once underestimated sitting at the head of it all, calm, clear, unshakable. It was a Friday afternoon, end-of-quarter review time, numbers, trends, forecasts. I was in my office, flipping through the latest reports, when a familiar name caught my eye. At first, I thought it had to be a mistake. But no, it was him, my ex-husband. Hired through a different division, buried under a tangle of middle management and restructured departments. No announcement, no formal onboarding, just quietly folded back into the company like a forgotten receipt in a suit pocket. My stomach didn't drop. My pulse didn't spike. I just sat there for a moment, blinking at the screen, letting the absurdity of it settle. He was back. Not as an executive, not with accolades, just another cog in the machine I now ran. A man who once left me behind for the promise of influence, now working under its shadow. And worse, it wasn't even a clean slate. There were flagged emails, correspondences with someone he should have stayed away from. I forwarded the documents to HR. No commentary, no color. Just subject line, review requested, ethics violation. I didn't need to explain. The evidence spoke louder than I ever could. Internal conversations, suggestive language, references to late-night meetings, and unfinished business. And her name was all over it. Again. Years later, and they were still playing the same dangerous game, only this time the rules were mine. I closed my laptop and stood at the window, watching the late sun crawl over the skyline. I remembered how I used to wonder what I'd say if I ever saw him again. Would I scream? Would I cry? But now, there was no urge, no words left to waste. I didn't need a confrontation. I had a system, and that system was already in motion. The HR team moved swiftly. I watched from a distance, no interference, no influence, just quiet oversight. They did their due diligence, interviewed department leads, combed through communication logs, verified timelines. It didn't take long. The evidence was solid. Inappropriate conduct, breach of internal policy, attempted manipulation of reporting structures. And the worst part? He'd tried to reignite something with her, his former boss, like time had frozen and I hadn't reshaped the entire company while they were busy chasing hotel room fantasies. I scheduled a formal meeting, 2 chairs, 1 long table. I wasn't nervous. I wasn't angry. I was ready. They entered the room separately, unaware that this was their final chapter. I watched their expressions shift when they realized who had called the meeting. Her lips parted like she wanted to protest. His brow furrowed with that same confusion he wore the night I told him I know. And just like then, I offered no drama, no explanation, just facts. I presented the documentation, their correspondence, their patterns, the policy breaches. Her hand went to her mouth. He leaned forward as if charm could fix this. "This isn't what it looks like," he said, voice almost pleading. I stayed silent. I didn't owe them a conversation. I handed them each an envelope, signed and sealed. Termination notices, final evaluations, and a line that read, "Dismissal due to unethical behavior and breach of company standards." They sat frozen for a moment, as if the room had lost its oxygen. He opened his mouth again, but I stood before he could speak. "HR will walk you out," I said simply, and then I left. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. The story had written itself, and I was the author now. The office felt quieter after they were gone. Not in the obvious way, but in that subtle shift you feel when something toxic finally clears from the air. No whispers, no sideways glances, just focus, forward motion. I walked past their empty offices without a flicker of emotion. The desks were already being cleared. Their names removed from directories. Just like that, they were out. Not with fireworks, with finality. That night, I stayed late. Not out of necessity, but because I wanted to sit in it. The stillness, the view. The absolute clarity that came from closing a chapter without burning the book. I thought about how it all began. Two people who thought they could use love and power as interchangeable tools. They thought betrayal was a ladder. They thought I'd crumble. And now they were both powerless, under the woman he never saw coming. But here's the thing. This was never just about revenge. It was about reclaiming the narrative. About showing up for every woman who's ever been sidelined, silenced, or told she wasn't enough. I didn't destroy them. I outgrew them. And maybe that's the greatest revenge of all, rising so far above the mess they made that they can't even see you anymore. I turned off the lights in my office that night, not as a woman scorned, but as a woman crowned. No spotlight, no applause, just the soft click of a door closing behind me. And a future waiting ahead, one I had built with my own two hands, steady and unstoppable.